When he received her call, he didn't expect it to be the last time he heard her voice. So, what happened after the call? That's what this episode reveals. Welcome to my channel, where I share with you stories, cases, and all that is mysterious and exotic. So, get yourselves comfortable, and let's get started. In the early hours of October 13, 1984, the Dallas Police Department received a call from a concerned boyfriend found his girlfriend door locked, and got no response from her. Fearing the worst, he called the police. Officers arrived at the condo around 2:17 a.m. They found the door locked and had to force their way in. What they discovered inside was a scene of horror. She was found naked and covered in blood on her bed. The room showed signs of a violent struggle, indicating that the victim had fought back against her attacker. Her autopsy later revealed that she had been raped and stabbed multiple times, with fatal injuries to her heart. The police immediately began their investigation. They interviewed the victim's friends, neighbors, and anyone who might have seen or heard something unusual that night. After interviewing witnesses following Angela's murder, the police gathered a range of information that helped to piece together the events of that night and guide their investigation. And by the way, Angela is the name of today's victim. Most neighbors did not see any strangers or unusual activity in the area immediately before or after the crime, and some reported hearing unusual noises or commotion around the time of the incident. It is her friends who are the last people to see her, confirmed that she had spent the evening with them at the State Fair of Texas and later at a nightclub. They described her as being in good spirits and did not notice anything out of the ordinary. Her friends also confirmed that Angie dropped them off at their homes before returning to her condo. They did not witness anyone following her or any suspicious activity. Even the staff and patrons of the nightclub where Angie and her friends had spent part of the evening did not report seeing anything suspicious. They described Angie and her friends as enjoying themselves and socializing normally. But the phone call from Angie's boyfriend provided vital information about the call she had made to him at 1:45 a.m., which added an important piece to the puzzle. So, who is Angie and what happened to her? Angela Marie Samota was born on September 19, 1964, in Alameda, California. She was the daughter of Frank and Betty Ruth Samota and the youngest of 5 children. Angela and her family later moved to Texas, where she spent much of her childhood. Angela attended high school in Texas and was known for her academic excellence and vibrant personality. She later enrolled at Southern Methodist University, SMU, in Dallas. She was studying computer science and electrical engineering and was an active member of the Zeta Tau Alpha sorority. She was 19 years old when she started college at SMU. October 12, 1984. On this night, Angela went out with 2 friends, Russell Buchanan and Anita Kadala, to the State Fair of Texas and then to a nightclub called the Rio Room. Angela's boyfriend, Ben McCall, did not join them as he had to work early the next morning. Angela and her friends started their evening at the State Fair of Texas. They then went to a nightclub in Dallas, where they spent several hours socializing and having fun. After leaving the club, Angela dropped her friends off at their respective homes, then made a brief stop at her boyfriend's apartment to say goodnight before heading back to her condo. And here comes the phone call to boyfriend that provided the crucial information. Around 1:45 a.m., Angela called her boyfriend to tell him that a man had come to her apartment asking to use the phone and bathroom. She mentioned she would call him back but never did. When Angela's boyfriend did not hear back from her, he drove to her condo, found the door locked, and got no response. He called the police, who arrived at the scene and discovered Angela's body inside her condo. Now it's time for a look at the suspects in the case. During the investigation of Angela Samota's murder, several individuals were interviewed and considered as potential suspects. Angie's boyfriend at the time, Ben McCall, was initially a person of interest because he was one of the last people to have spoken to her. However, his cooperation with the police and a solid alibi led to his quick elimination as a suspect. The friends with whom Angela Samota spent the evening of the 12th of October 1984 at the Texas State Fair and later at a nightclub. Anita Kadala, was a friend of Angela Samota. They were not particularly close, but they shared mutual friends and social circles. On the night of Angela's murder, Anita was with Angel at the State Fair of Texas and later at a nightclub. Anita provided valuable information to the police about their activities that evening, helping to establish a timeline of events. She was never considered a strong suspect. Her cooperation and the information she provided helped establish the timeline of events leading up to Angela's murder. There was no evidence linking her to the crime, and she was eliminated as a suspect early on in the investigation. Move on to the next suspect. Russell Buchanan. Today, of course, that name is well known around Dallas. Russell Buchanan is the celebrated architect. His boxy, contemporary homes and apartment buildings have won prestigious awards. His work has graced the pages of Architectural Digest. He shocked Highland Park purists last fall by plopping down a white cube of a house, clad in synthetic panels, on Mockingbird Lane, near a 10-year-old European castle. And his sculptural spring table, he designs furniture and is an artist as well, is in the permanent collection of the Dallas Museum of Art. But at the time of the case, Buchanan was a scared 23-year-old. He was only a year out of Texas A&M's architecture program. It was Monday night around 6 p.m. and he was still in his suit from his first job, a working internship with HKS Architects downtown. A knock on the front door. He opened the door and found himself staring at a Dallas Police Department badge. A detective in a coat and tie stood there. Beside him was a hulking uniformed officer with a short-barreled shotgun aimed right at the skinny young man's chest. The detective and the officer stepped inside. More police filed in behind them. "We have some questions to ask you about the murder of Angie Samota." Angie. Buchanan's mind was reeling. He had gone bar-hopping Friday night with Samota and her friend, Anita Kadala, but the truth was he hardly knew her. Angela Samota was pretty, long blonde hair and angel eyes, and he knew about sorority, Zeta Tau Alpha, at SMU, and her studying computer science and electrical engineering. And now she was dead. He eventually learned the details about her murder. Buchanan first met Samota at a happy hour one night at Andrew's restaurant, now Breadwinners, on McKinney Avenue with a group of mutual friends. They exchanged information and he later invited her to lunch to see the new Dallas Museum of Art building downtown. The lunch never happened, but Angie did call him that Friday night and ask if he wanted to go out with her and her friend. Every place that Samota, Kadala, and Buchanan went was crowded with Texas OU fans. They ended up at Lakewood's Boardwalk Beach Club. Buchanan still remembers that the floor was covered in white sand and they had set up a volleyball net inside. The friends headed over to Shannon Wynn's Nostromo restaurant on Travis, where Samota got them into the upstairs club, Rio Room. They enjoyed champagne and dancing. Angie, says Buchanan, was going table to table, talking to people. She knew everyone. The two women dropped Buchanan off around 1 a.m. at his apartment on Matilda Street, which was a 5-minute walk from Samota's condo on Amesbury Drive. He says he went to bed and fell asleep. Samota was killed less than 2 hours later. The next day, Buchanan got up early to attend a morning wedding in Dallas. A friend took him to the airport afterward for a previously scheduled trip to visit his family in Houston. He got back late Sunday and went straight to work. He didn't see a newspaper and hadn't heard about Samota's death until the police knocked on his door. The police's questions that night were quickly becoming directives. "Mr. Buchanan, you need to stand over here. You need to keep your hands out of your pockets." And they asked to search his apartment. He cooperated and gave them permission to search, but today is chagrined at what they saw. The apartment was filled with junky knives and old spears. His roommate had just returned from a 2-week African safari. More than a little awkward, considering how Samota died. Buchanan then got his final directive. "You're coming down to the station with us." He was escorted outside. There were no handcuffs, as this would just be questioning, but there were flashing blue and red lights from half a dozen squad cars surrounding his complex. The car doors were open and officers crouched behind them, their weapons drawn. It was like I was Dillinger or something, Buchanan recalls. They really thought the murderer had skipped town and now he was back, and that was me. The police quickly zeroed in on 3 suspects: Samota's boyfriend, McCall, an old ex-boyfriend from her hometown of Abilene, who had once cut up her clothes in a rage and threatened her with a knife, and Russell Buchanan. DNA science was in its earliest stages at the time of the murder, but police were able to collect blood and semen samples from Samota's body. McCall and the ex-boyfriend were excluded from being at the scene because theirs did not match the intruder's blood type. Buchanan's was a match. Worse, police were suspicious because Buchanan didn't have an alibi for the time of the murder and had left town the following day. Buchanan took a lie detector test early in the case, which he passed. For 6 months after the murder, police detectives regularly picked up Buchanan for questioning down at the station. They showed up at his office to talk with him. It didn't take long for word to spread. To his co-workers' credit, Buchanan says, "No one stopped talking when I walked into the room." The police waited for him outside his house when he got home late at night to take him in for several more hours of questioning. Detectives had clearly decided he was guilty, even re-examining his lie detector results and deciding they were inconclusive. They began directly accusing him. Buchanan vividly recalls them holding up graphic crime scene photos of Samota's ravaged body and demanding his confession. Finally, at his concerned parents' urging, he did get an attorney, a referral from a friend of the family. During an extremely intense interrogation session, he asked to call the attorney, who then got on the line with the lead detective. "Either charge my client or take him home, right now." The police may have ceased their conversations with Buchanan after his lawyer got involved, but their interest in him only intensified. He was under 24-hour surveillance. They knew everything about him, including which day he left for graduate school in London, sparking worries that he was fleeing the country. Police gained an unexpected ally in their investigation through Angela Samota's friend and SMU freshman roommate, Sheila Wysocki. And keep her name in your mind. The week after Samota's murder, they approached Wysocki and asked her about the men in Samota's life, including Buchanan. She cooperated with investigators and became a trusted source. One of the investigators eventually confided to her his theory that it was Buchanan and asked for her help. Wysocki agreed to wear a wire and set up several phone conversations with Buchanan to try and gather evidence. She even went out to dinner with him at a local restaurant. Undercover police were positioned at a table close by. "I thought I was having dinner with a murderer," Wysocki says, in a telephone interview from her home in Tennessee. "I wasn't brave, I was just doing what I thought was right." Police never obtained incriminating evidence from the efforts. The case went cold over the next 2 decades. Buchanan moved on. He finished graduate school in London and spent 6 months, unpaid, building models for Frank Gehry in Los Angeles before finally moving back to Dallas to resume his career. He married his wife, Karen, in the early 1990s. He explained to her early on about the dark cloud in his life. She says she never once doubted his innocence. Meanwhile, Wysocki moved to Nashville, became a mom and became increasingly frustrated that there had not been justice for her friend. "I did not like the fact that Russell got to be this big-deal architect and live his life when he had taken the life of my roommate," she says. "That bothered me." By the mid-2000s, a decade after Angela's death, Sheila saw the potential of DNA evidence while watching television coverage of the O.J. Simpson trial. She realized that the DNA evidence from Angela's case could be re-examined. For over 12 years, Sheila persistently urged the police to re-examine the DNA evidence collected from Angela's murder scene. She began a campaign of phone calls to Dallas authorities to try and get someone to reopen the case. Some of Samota's friends and former sorority sisters also called. Wysocki even went so far as to get a private investigator's license to try and get access to the evidence in storage for possible DNA testing. "The FBI has nothing on a worried mother," says Wysocki. "I'm a better investigator. This is a testament to the power of persistence and the impact one person can have in seeking for justice." Finally, she says, Dallas police reopened the case in 2006. The stored evidence contained enough material for modern DNA testing, and in 2008 they had a hit. Wysocki will never forget when she got the call. Lead detective Linda Crumb's voice was crisp and confident. "We got him," says Wysocki. "The next words I expected to hear were, Russell Buchanan. But that's not what she said. She named this guy, Donald Andrew Bess. I could feel my world turning upside down. For 23 years, in my mind, Russell Buchanan was the murderer. And in one split second, everything I thought I knew was no longer correct. I had made it my life goal to get this man behind bars, and suddenly I felt so guilty." Russell Buchanan was equally stunned to get that phone call from police. They reached his wife first, but then Buchanan called back and a sergeant with the Dallas Police Department explained they had caught Angie Samota's killer. Bess had a history of sexual assault. There is no much details about him. Police theorized that Bess, who was out on parole in 1984, became fixated on Samota after spotting her at a bar. According to reports from Samota's friends, her striking looks often earned her attention and sometimes even love notes from strangers. Police believed Bess followed her home that night. They thought he probably began stabbing Samota with a kitchen knife to silence her when her boyfriend, Ben McCall, knocked on the door. Bess may have finished the crime while McCall called the police from his truck and searched the neighborhood. Based on the DNA evidence, Bess was arrested and tried for Angela's murder. Buchanan testified against Bess at Bess capital murder trial in June 2010. He was convicted and sentenced to death due to the sheer brutality of his actions and the significant lapse of time before his conviction. He remained on death row until he died of natural causes in October 2022 while still awaiting execution. Donald Andrew Bess Jr. died of a heart attack while in prison on September 1, 2022. He was 74 years old at the time of his death. This case remains an impactful example of how persistence and technological progress can eventually bring justice, even in long-standing cold cases. If you have any story or mystery want to hear, please let us know about it in the channel email. See you soon, folks.